At a bar in Los Angeles, pilot Rich is doing karaoke to celebrate his final flight before retirement. At the hotel, First Officer Ben gets a call from his wife, who is upset because he isn't going home as promised. Ben explains that the schedule changed, so his wife reminds him that their son is sick and Ben hasn't been around lately. It turns out Ben is deliberately scheduling specific flights to avoid going home. The next morning at the airport, Dan is scolded for smoking, yet he lights a second cigarette when the employee leaves. His tablet is running low on battery, so he connects it to a power bank and tosses them in a suitcase. When he checks in, he's asked if his suitcase has any batteries, and he says no. Meanwhile, Ben overhears Cora say she's afraid of flying and her father Declan fails to comfort her. Ben tries to explain that there are more dangerous things than flying, but Cora only answers with sass and sarcasm. After Ben leaves, Cora's stepmother Jaya puts a tracker on her son Finn and sets up the tracking app on the phone with Finn's birthday, the password at the gate. A sports player Lily accidentally bumps into Hutch, a wrestler who keeps making fun of gamers. Hutch starts harassing Lily and only gets more excited when she calls him out. Team leader Sam comes to her defense, but before things can escalate, Hutch's coach drags him away. When Sam and Lily try to board the plane, Dan cuts in line in the cockpit. Ben reads in the technical report that a fan isn't working well and says they shouldn't depart until it's fixed. Rich presses a button to reset that fan and decides they shall depart anyway. When Ben does extra checks on the flaps, Rich scolds him for overthinking. After the plane takes off, Rich says that he thought Ben wanted to punch him for his scolding. That's what got him kicked out of the Air Force and why he hasn't made it to captain, despite his age. But at least they can joke about it. Sometime later, the plane is shaken by some turbulence, but it only lasts a second. Matt keeps staring at flight attendant Zoe, but Becky tells him he has no chance because he's a 5 and Zoe is a 9. Meanwhile, Sam tells Lily that they almost lost their last game because of all her planning. They won in the end, but they need to work as a team. Lily also asks him why he's afraid of reading her letter, so Sam promises to do so when they land. Then Sam goes to the and stares at Lily's letter with mixed feelings. Later, Declan tells Cora to be nicer to her new family, but she ignores him. When he and Gio start kissing, Cora makes gagging noises. Then the couple goes to the bathroom together to get naughty. When Finn's tablet runs out of battery, he looks for his mother. So, Cora tells him that they're in the pool at the end of the plane. Finn goes looking for them only to get lost. Matt notices this and invites Finn to sit with him to show him a game. After a few minutes, Cora feels alone and goes to knock on the bathroom door. In the cargo hold, Don's power bank starts to heat up and soon it catches on fire, which quickly spreads to other bags in the container. An alarm rings in the cockpit, so Ben activates the fire suppression system, but it isn't working well. Then he calls traffic control and gets permission to land at the nearest airport. Two crew members enter the cargo hold and try to put out the fire, but their extinguishers aren't enough and the flames grow. When the plane suddenly shakes and tilts, the container rolls down and crashes into some gas tanks. A small explosion fills the room with fire and causes a tank to be shot through the wall, breaking the pressure as the plane starts falling at great speed. A tank bursts through the floor into the cabin and bounces all over the plane, killing a passenger by hitting him in the head. The shaking causes Gio and Declan to slam their heads on the bathroom mirror. The cabin loses pressure, too, and objects start flying, hurting several people. Cora is almost blown out of the plane, but Lily catches her just in time. Everyone puts on the oxygen masks except for Declan and Gio, who are unconscious. After some effort and several minutes of turbulence, Rich manages to stabilize the plane by staying at a safe altitude. He then informs the passengers about the fire and asks them to stay calm. While they divert to the Guam airport, Sam comes out of the bathroom and tries to return to Lily, but Zoe makes him take a random seat because it's too dangerous to move around. While she's distracted, Dan sneaks to the bathroom to smoke. Cora wants to go looking for her parents. However, Lily forces her to stay. Suddenly, the container in the cargo hold is sucked out of the plane through the hole left by the explosion, and it hits an engine, setting it on fire. While everyone panics, Zoe sends Dan back to his seat. Soon, the burning engine is blown away and makes a hole in the cabin wall. So many passengers are blown away too, with their seats in the cockpit. Ben notices that they've lost half of the system instruments. He calls air traffic again to ask for a closer airport, but there's nothing in the area. As passengers struggle to hold on, Cora runs to look for her father, but is caught by flight attendant Penny. The second engine is starting to catch on fire too, and the cockpit loses the rest of the instruments before the power shuts down. The pilots activate the ram air turbine, which acts as a backup source of power. However, this isn't enough for a relight or to dive for more speed, so they dump all the fuel. Then Rich tells the passengers to brace for impact, and the crowd begins to cry and pray. As the plane descends dangerously fast, Ben and Rich argue over what technique to use to land. When Ben points out the possibility of a cartwheel, Rich finally agrees to do it his way. Rich concentrates on the mission, using all his knowledge and experience to keep the plane under control. Thanks to Rich's effort, the plane successfully lands on the water. However, it keeps sliding and soon is hit by a coral reef. The plane is split into several parts, get hurt or killed by the debris before a huge wave violently bursts into the cabin, flooding it and killing even more people. Seconds later, debris, flames, and bodies are floating on the ocean. A few people have managed to survive and keep screaming for help. Lily swims until she manages to hold on to some debris. Suddenly, a shark grabs her leg and pulls her back into the water. Lily struggles until she manages to free herself and climb onto a plane piece. She has a breakdown when she sees the scar the shark left on her leg. Noticing that the metal is sinking, she walks away from the water. In the cockpit, Ben tries to wake up Rich, saying they would have won if it hadn't been because of the coral reef. At that moment, the windows begin to crack. Penny tells Cora to wait and rushes to the cockpit to help Ben free Rich from his chair. When they pull, Rich wakes up to scream in pain because his leg is pinned by a piece of metal. Ben tries using an emergency axe to remove the metal to no avail and notices that Rich is bleeding too much. Rich accepts that this is the end, so he has a heartfelt goodbye with Penny and Ben before sending them away. After locking the door, Ben and Penny find a wounded flight attendant and free her from the seat. In the meantime, Rich holds a family picture and sings his favorite song until the windows breaks. The water kills him as soon as it comes in. Some of it also opens the door and makes the others fall. Ben bandages the unconscious attendant with his tie and tells Penny they must look for survivors. In the bathroom, Jay wakes up and immediately awakens Declan, too. He panics and opens the door, so water quickly floods the room. Meanwhile, the plane's tail is upright and slowly flooding. Matt yells for help, and the only one who answers is Zoe, who throws him a flashlight. While Matt frees Finn from the seatbelt, Zoe starts going down. The bodies keep startling her and she slips a few times, but eventually she reaches the bottom. Matt and Zoe notice that Becky is only unconscious, so they yell at her until she wakes up. Now the group has to climb up to avoid the rising water. When they get to the top, Matt almost opens the door, but Zoe stops him and explains they're in an air bubble. So, breaking the seal would make this plane section sink. While Zoe bandages Matt's hand, Finn begins to hyperventilate, so Becky comforts him and distracts him by talking about his family. Unfortunately, the plane shakes when it slips on the coral, so Finn panics again. In the cockpit, Ben wonders if they could find the emergency locator transmitter, which is in the midsection. Penny shares that she's a champion swimmer and volunteers to go looking for it. A few minutes after Penny leaves, Cora is horrified to see a shark in the water and alerts Ben. They both start yelling to warn Penny, but she's too far to hear anything. Ben activates an emergency life raft and gives Cora the only life jacket before they get on the raft to go after Penny. The shark is already swimming around her, so by the time the raft gets close enough, it's too late. The shark bites Penny's leg and drags her underwater. After some struggle, Penny manages to resurface, but the shark keeps dragging her down. Ben reaches for her and tries to bring her aboard. However, the shark bites her again and tears her body in half. Then the shark jumps high enough to land on the raft. So Ben desperately hits it with a paddle until it leaves. In the plane's midsection, most seats have dead bodies. Sam searches for Lily, but he finds blood on her seat. The survivors gather at the hole to analyze the situation, and the weight causes the plane to slip since it's precariously perched on the coral reef. The shaking makes a woman fall into the water. Thankfully, Jim quickly brings her back. Sam tries to tell everyone that they need to move back and distribute the weight, but Hutch thinks he's sending them to the water, and an argument ensues. Jim has to separate them, and Hutch shuts up when his coach and teammates also agree with Sam. While the midsection survivors start moving to the other seats, Lily's base finally finishes sinking. She has no choice but to jump into the water and swim. She reaches the midsection and startles the coach when she resurfaces. Then she runs to hug Sam. While they're distracted, the shark gets close enough to capture the coach and drag him into the water. The man struggles and his blood dyes the water red. So Hutch's teammate gets in the water to try to help him. Hutch also wants to help, but Jim holds him back. Unfortunately, fighting back isn't enough, and the shark quickly kills both the coach and team. Afterward, Hutch blames these deaths on Sam's plan and jumps on him to start beating him up. When Jim tries to separate them, he gets punched too. At that moment, Ben arrives and pulls Hutch back, telling him to keep his cool. He wants to live. In the tail, Zoe says they don't have much air left. Matt points out that if they stay there, nobody will rescue them. So he volunteers to go out. He dives in and swims as fast as possible, dodging bodies in the way. His shirt gets stuck in some debris, but he releases it fast and manages to swim to the surface. While he yells for help, he's startled by a hand on his shoulder. It's Declan, who is floating on a door with Jay's body. Declan says Cora's name before a shark jumps out of the water to devour him. In the midsection, Ben guides the survivors to find life jackets and a second raft. Then he searches the storage bins until he finds the transmitter, only to accidentally drop one of the antennas. Thankfully, he retrieves it quickly by diving. While everyone gets on the rafts, Ben turns the transmitter on and gets ready to leave too, only to notice that Cora is near the hole looking for her father. He gives the transmitter to Dan and runs to grab Cora, picking her up just in time to save her from a jumping shark. Suddenly, the plane shifts on reef again, and a ferocious wave bursts into the cabin, pushing several people into the water. Don is so desperate to climb back up that he drops the transmitter in the process. While Jim helps Ben and Cora, Sam holds onto a suitcase. He notices an unconscious Hutch nearby and swims toward him to rescue him, but as Sam yells for help, the sharks begin swimming around the boys. On the raft, Ben asks about the transmitter and gets angry when Dan confesses he dropped it, but he also says that it was Ben's responsibility. When they hear Sam's screams, Ben wants to help him, but Dan refuses to move the raft and thinks Ben just wants to feel better after crashing the plane. Then Dan punches Ben, who immediately punches him back and announces they're helping the boys. Don wants to move to the other raft, but the crowd doesn't let him and insults him. Ben and Jim as fast as possible, and their raft soon reaches the boys.